everyone. Welcome to another Rootless conversation. I'm your Rootless expert, Greta Bayrami, and today I have the pleasure of sitting down with Sonia Chopra, who's going to talk about her rootless journey and how she ended up in the world of dentistry. A fabulous world it is, with lots of smiles, I assume. But Sonia, before I get started in understanding the industry and the making of your career, I want to go back and I want to ask a question. When I mention the word rootless, does that resonate with something within you or within your journey?
Yes, and it's crazy because I'm a root canal specialist, right? So when I hear the word rootless, the only thing that comes to my mind is what I do for a living. So I basically take the nerves out of teeth. So I go into the root, clean it out, and leave nothing in there. So for me, rootless kind of describes my job. I mean, you still have a root, but what's inside the root is gone. So I'm sure that's the first time you've heard that.
No, that's why I ask it, because you never know what you're gonna hear. But Sonia, talk to us a little bit about your roots and where it all began with you.
Yeah, so it actually started when I was born because I was born without 8 teeth. So, and every time I went to the dentist, I had 8 cavities. Just married to my dentist. I was there, always having dental problems. Didn't really think anything of it through my childhood. Didn't really mean anything to me until I started to get my adult teeth. And then finally, after I graduated college or high school, so 1995, I had all these missing teeth, and my mom, her only thing that she wanted was to make sure that I went to college and I would eat properly, right? So she made sure that I got everything restored. So I spent my summer going to graduation parties and the dentist that summer. And soon after I got all this work done, I started to get some tooth pain. And nobody could tell where my pain was coming from. I went from doctor to doctor, ended up seeing 6 or 7 doctors, couldn't find out where the pain was coming from. I was getting a lot of referred pain and just couldn't pinpoint it. And this went on for about 9 months. I even went to college and had to keep coming home because of this toothache that I was having. And I just couldn't tell you where it was coming from. And neither could anybody else. And then finally, my pain got so bad, I swelled up. They're just like, okay, we're just gonna have to take your tooth out because we don't know how to fix it. And they took out my tooth and it was the wrong tooth. Because after the anesthesia wore off, I still had my toothache and I still had my infection. And then I was sent to an endodontist who saved my life, saved me from pain, made me understand what I was going through with my body, allowed me to retrust my body. But his whole demeanor was amazing. And, I was 17 years old and that really made an impression on me. And I never really knew what I wanted to be when I grew up at that time. But I'm Indian American, so I basically have very limited choices. My parents you could be a doctor, a dentist, a lawyer, or an engineer. That's it. So pick one. And my mom and my brother are both physicians. My mom's an anesthesiologist and my brother is a neuroradiologist and my dad is an engineer. So you see how that works? And I'm like, well, they already kind of checked those boxes. I've always been at the dentist. I've always been a patient. I've literally had every dental procedure done in my mouth, so I know what it's like. So I picked dentistry. Plus, I was very interested in what happened to me. Why did my story happen the way it did? And so that is what got me into dentistry. But then when I got into dentistry, I'm like, I need to take it a step further. I want to know more about my pain. I want to know more about my experience. And so that's what led me into endodontics, which is a particular specialty in dentistry. And then when I became an endodontist, I realized that I still saw the same story in my patients coming into my practice. They didn't know where the pain was coming from. Somebody, said it was this tooth and it was another tooth. And I was like, wow, stuff has not changed in years. And the education is broken. The way we are teaching this one topic in school is broken. And so I'm like, I need to do something about it because I know what it's like to be in this position. I want to change it for other people. And that's when I decided to go beyond my practice and start my own education platform.
Wow. So because you had suffered it, you had been on the receiving end, you were you were flawed by the system when having that wrong tooth taken out. And once you took that journey and you wanted to become, join the world of dentistry for yourself, you said, well, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to do it to educate others, and I'm going to do it to strengthen this. And how does one go about that? How does a young dentist at the time take on such a big mission?
Well, I didn't know it was my mission back then, right? I think that this kind of organically brewed in my soul while I was a practicing endodontist. And
Okay.
I knew it was there, but I kind of ignored that feeling for a while. And then as I started to see that, okay, information needs to be shared. And so I would then start lecturing locally in Charlotte, North Carolina, where my practice is, and just start talking to my community dentists. And then I realized, wow, there's more people that need to know this. And then I was like, okay, let me take everything that I know, let me package it. And why do I have to stay local? I can go global with this information. So that's kind of where that went. And then now, again, it just continues to organically grow. And I just continue to spread the reach because, there's so many people all over the world who don't have access to this type of education. So it's really nice to know that we can share this.
So I want to go back and make the connection from coming out of school to running your own practice. I mean, that's tough. I mean, a lot of dentists want to do it, but some end up either collaborating with others or joining other people's practices. But you said that your approach was a little bit different. So can you talk about that connection post school and and practice?
I remember the anxiety that I had my 4th year of dental school, feeling that I wasn't ready. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose the safety umbrella of school. If I make a mistake, I'm in trouble. And I didn't feel ready. And I'm sure so many people feel the same way. So I knew that I wanted to do the next step, which was a general practice residency. So I did a GPR. Plus, I wanted to live 1 year of my life in New York City. So I moved to New York City. I had gotten into a residency and I continued my education for another year in a hospital umbrella. And I learned a ton. And I started to notice, okay, this is where I started to realize, okay, maybe there's a little desire here to become an endodontist, And so I would kind of swap cases with my co-residents, like, oh, you want to make dentures? Here, take this denture. I'll take your root canal. And I started to see that this is where I was gravitating to. So I gave myself the time that I needed, that extra step, to see where my desires were within the field of dentistry. And then it was the real world. It was what I was dreading. I was like, okay, now I have to go out into the real world. And I didn't start my own practice right away. I actually was an associate. I was a general dentist and I would associate in different offices. And when I was in New York City, I couldn't find a job that was full-time. So I had 3 part-time jobs going at once. So Mondays I was here, Tuesdays I was there. I would be in Queens, Manhattan, Brooklyn, you name it. I worked all over the city. And in 2 years, I had 9 different jobs. Yeah. And I hated it. And I was like, wow, I was really, my growth was stunted. I knew that I didn't have any job where I could flourish as a clinician, as a leader, as an anything. And I saw the way I was being treated as an associate. And I was like, oh, this is when I knew that I needed to be a practice owner. I had to experience it though. I had to see what I liked, what I didn't like. I mean, there were definitely things that I'm like, oh, I emulated about certain bosses. I'm like, okay, I'm going to take this with me to my practice. Or something that I didn't like. I'm not going to treat people like this, or I'm going to do it this way, or clinically, I'm going to do this way, whatever. And I made a lot of decisions at that time. I had one job where I was the only person in the practice. I was the front desk. I answered the phone. I was the hygienist. I was the assistant. I had to take all my own x-rays. I did my own billing. You name it, I did it. And it was horrendous, but in retrospect, I look at it, I'm like, oh my God, I learned so much.
Yeah.
So glad I went through it. Glad it was a short period of time, but I saw the value of what team members make, right? I don't think I could have seen that.
And is that typical that that's part-time, that's going wherever the job is? That typical of what to expect
Um,
when you're a young professional in the world of dentistry starting out?
I think it depends on the location. I think in bigger cities, it's more common than like a rural area where you would be needed full time in a position. So in Charlotte, North Carolina, when I see associates, I feel like they're mainly full time. But in New York City, it wasn't that way. And I was making like nothing. I was making $400 a day, and my rent was $2,200 a month. So I was barely scraping by. And that was a big like factor for me to like reevaluate my life at the time.
Yeah.
And again, I noticed that I loved doing root canals, and that was the procedure that I kept on doing over and over again, and that's the procedure that kind of differentiated me from other dentists because that's what I was doing. Now, was I doing it well? Probably not. Now knowing the standards that I do now. But I saw that I loved getting people out of pain. I would pay attention to the feeling that I had inside when I was performing these things. And I started to gain a level of confidence because I was doing it over and over and over again. And then I realized, okay, well, maybe it's time for me to make that decision, because a lot of people like to do general dentistry because they like to do a mishmash
Love
of
it.
things. Other people, like myself, I don't like to just be okay at everything. I want to be really good at one thing. So
Yeah.
my brain is designed to be a specialist.
Yeah.
So I decided, okay, let's apply to endo. I applied, I got in, and then I moved to South Florida. In between, I took 2 months off. I went backpacking around Thailand, Laos, and Cambodia because I
Well
sublet my
deserved.
yeah, I sublet my New York City apartment because I wasn't making any money, and I could live on $18 a day in Thailand and I couldn't do that in New York City. So I sublet my apartment, my rent was paid for, and I just backpacked around there. I figured I'm not going to be able to do this
Yeah.
again for a very long time. So I took some time off, and then I did my endo residency. And then after that, I moved to, so I went from New York City to South Florida. And then
Yeah.
I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, because that's where my fiance was and his family is here. And I didn't know anybody. I couldn't find a job because the economy
Wow.
tanked. It was 2008 and the economy tanked. And nobody was busy enough to hire an associate. And so I was like, okay, I can either be unemployed or I can start my own practice.
So that's your big moment. Your big moment
Yeah.
was born out of necessity. Do you think you would have taken the road regardless at some point, or do you think you were pushed into it?
I knew I needed that because my one of my core values is growth, and I saw how stunted in growth I was in my other jobs, and I needed to be my own boss. And that's still one of my golden rules. Like, I have to be my own boss.
And what are some traits that you think are necessary to be your own boss and have your own dental practice? Do you think there's a few traits that are a must to make it and really flourish?
Resilience, perseverance, but I think most importantly, it's commitment. The more I can commit to something, I see that it gets done, and it gets done well, and it continues my growth.
And the next question, because it was a very Googled one, how does one even start a dental practice? I mean, sure, there's got to be like license insurance, but like, what are those first essential steps?
Okay, so I got lucky because I had my husband, who is also a dentist, and he was already in practice here. So I had a lot of support and from him. There's kind of a system that's already built in. So, you need to find the commercial real estate. You need to find the perfect location for you. And so I had a commercial real estate guy. You've got to have a banker because you need to have your loan. My husband did my business plan for me. So I'm sure there's a template you can get from somebody to create the business plan to get the loan. And then you pick your dental supply company, and they actually help you create the design of your practice and
Wow.
the flow. So there's a lot of built-in support, which is nice. And they all know each other, and it's a network. So you kind of work within the network. and then you need your IT, and then once all that is built out, and you need your construction, you need your that,
Yeah. Yeah.
and but they all know each other in town,
Yeah.
you
Absolutely.
know.
And
So
no, that's interesting. That's already laid out. So, if you're a young dentist out there, it's more about that commitment. Of course, there's financials to it, but a lot of the systems have already been laid out by other dentists and other practices that came before you.
yeah. And you have the option of starting your own, like doing a true startup, or you can buy an existing practice. So it depends. There's so many things that you need to consider in your own life, because you may not, like, I could afford to not take a paycheck my first year because I could live off
Mhm.
my husband, but not many people can't do that. And they are the sole breadwinner. So they need to find a practice that already has that patient
Yeah.
flow and that workflow, right? So you've got to figure out which is good for you, or
Eh,
maybe you're going to associate for a while in a practice and then buy into it later. There's a lot of different options.
For sure. And my next question to that is, how does one establish a brand if you're going that solo route of I want to do my own practice? What does establishing a brand mean in dentistry? We might have a general idea what it means in other industries, but how does that correlate into dentistry?
Well, I think you figure out what services are really your niche. Like, even as a general dentist, you could specialize in certain things within your own
Yeah.
practice. Like, maybe you like to do sleep apnea, maybe you like to do implants, maybe you like to do Invisalign. So you can kind of create anything because it's your office, your brand. If you have a story to tell, like I have a story, my story is
Hmm.
about a toothache. I encourage people to share their stories, because the more you share that, the more people will connect with you. And so everything that I do now is kind of built around my story,
Yeah,
because I'm a tooth saver to the max. I don't want anyone to take out their tooth unless they need to. I really value teeth because of my personal story. So, like, my tagline is give teeth a chance.
that's a good one.
Yeah.
I like it. And I'm assuming your success has led to identifying that niche clientele, right? Like being that specialist.
Yes and no. I think that my niche is still being developed even now, 13 years in,
Wow.
because we're continuously evolving and continuously growing. And it used to be, okay, I'm going to sign up with these insurances to get patients. And now I realize that that doesn't fit my brand. I want people to choose me for me, not because of who I'm in network with their insurance. Like, if you're a price shopper, you're not in my niche. If you don't value the technology that we use in our practice to provide you this amazing care, you're not in my niche. And we've had to be okay with saying goodbye to certain people to make sure that our brand lives on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes sense completely because it brings up a very sore talked about point that sometimes dentists are more worried about harvesting these relationships with insurance companies. And I didn't
Mhm.
want to talk about it, but it is something that's very Googled on the consumer end. So you're speaking to that. You're saying, yeah, sometimes it's necessary, but I like to part ways with it. And because I'm trying to make sure that clients pick me for me, not because of a
Right.
relationship that I have with a certain insurance company.
Right. And you don't want the insurance to dictate. I think it's absurd that you have an insurance and they tell, and let's say you have a toothache and you're dying, you cannot sleep, and you come to my practice and I say, okay, well, your insurance just told us that they'll pay for the root canal, but they won't pay for me to evaluate you to tell you what tooth you actually need the root canal on. So I have to tell the patient, you have to cough up this amount of money because they're not going to pay for it so that I can
Wow.
treat you. But if you do the consult, the valuation today, I can treat you tomorrow. How stupid is that? Sorry.
It is.
Like,
It is. I
that's
mean,
just
it's a flawed system.
that's just like the perfect example. Like, they'll pay for it if we do it on two separate days, but if I do it today, even though you're in an emergency situation, your pain level is a 12 out of 10, I can't I can treat you, but you're going to have to pay for one or the other. So we don't like, we just have them pay for the cheaper of the two out of pocket.
Wow.
But It's just,
That's a flawed,
it's,
yeah, that's definitely that's another topic altogether. We can talk about
yeah,
that for an
I
hour.
know.
And how do you go about creating loyalty with clients when it is your own brand? Is there any
Mhm.
specific ways that you go about it today, or something you've learned along the way that's helped you create loyalty?
For me, even back in the beginning, it was always like just doing the right thing, and always about the experience. From the moment people walk in the door to saying hello to my front desk to going back, having the treatment, and then leaving, and making sure that I did the right thing. Whether it's okay, maybe sometimes your treatment doesn't work. What are you going to do about it? There should be like a no question asked. There should be almost like some sort of guarantee. I don't let people ask me for a refund or anything. I'm like, I will do it again for you at no charge. So just sticking to my brand, sticking to what I do, just sticking it out to the end and making sure the overall experience is great. I always said, if as long as I do the right thing, the money will come. It was never about the money in the first place. It was always about my patient and taking care of my patient. And I felt like if I just stayed true to that, everything else would come along with it.
Yeah. I'm going to ask a pop-up question just from a consumer perspective. Do you think
Yeah.
sometimes dentists lose touch with that because it's all about the bills and the insurance relationships? Do you think they lose sight of that it's essentially is about the customer? I only ask this because I know that sometimes a lot of dentists don't have good reviews, and it's like really tough to find one that has good reviews. And I wonder if there's a connection there.
I think there's a difference between a practice owner and then working for a chain. I really do. And I think people who aren't invested in the practice, that it's like their name written all over everything, I think
Hmm.
you'll see the difference.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
do. There are like rare, like unicorn dentists that work in these places and they are really good. So I don't want to like sound like
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
bashing them. Um, but I think I do see a difference. Yeah.
Yeah. And as you're growing clientele, as you're growing yourself and you're on it on your own journey, let's say you're doing your own thing, your own practice, how do you determine where to offer your services? Is there something that works today for dentists that's working for you to really drive growth and let customers know that you're there? Are you using social, just web, ads? Can you talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, as a specialist, a lot of my practice is referral based. So I do believe in relationships and I do like to work with dentists that I'm very aligned with. I think it's
Mhm.
better for everybody. It's a better experience for the patient as well as they transition from one practice to the next and then back to their dentist. I think it's really helpful when there's a relationship between the two dentists because sometimes treatment plans can get really complex and you need that conversation on the patient's behalf. Sometimes I have to be the patient's advocate and go back and speak to the dentist. That's one piece. And I would say in 2016, that's when I started to realize that if I don't make a shift into the online world, I was going to be missing out. And so now my number one referral is who we call Dr. Google. And having that online presence has made a huge shift in my practice.
And is it of course, it's the intentional online presence. And are people seeking you out and as more of needing you today, or is it more for that educational piece of helping other dentists around the United States or the world?
It's a mishmash of everything, so some patients have found me for treatment today. Other patients have found me from across the world because they landed on my blog and they are like, oh wow, like, and some people have even flown in to see me now, which is kind of crazy. Yeah.
That's exciting. Oh
Yeah.
man. Talk to us a little bit about, because I know you touched on it in the beginning, but talk to us a little bit about the educational aspect of what you do, and how does it work? If you could just put it into words for us so we understand a little bit more about it.
So when we are in dental school, we have 4 years, right? But 2 weeks of it is like a crash course in endo. And then when we graduate, most of us get about 4 root canals. We're allowed to do 4 before we graduate. And then we're allowed to just do it. And I was one of those people. And I was doing root canals as a general dentist. And I'm pretty sure a lot of those failed. But I remember one in particular. I did it. I know I missed a canal, so I didn't treat the entire tooth, but totally innocently thought that I had. And she had called me a few days later saying her tooth was still bothering her. I said, oh, give it some time, but then I moved from New York. So, I had geographical success because I moved. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what happened.
Oh man.
but this is what happens. And that is what continues to happen. And so 50% of my practice, what I do is fixing other root canals that not were they were not ill intentionally done wrong, right? So I want to take the bad intention out of it. It's just someone really thought that they did it right, and they do what they can with the resources that they have. And that's where I noticed that the breakdown in education is really there. I mean, we have people in dental school who haven't even done a root canal themselves that are teaching how to do root canals.
Wow.
And
That's scary. Yeah.
yeah, it's a little scary. And so we need more education. So I became a board certified endodontist in 2014, and I had to go back and restudy everything because I had to give an oral examination. So I had to know it, right? But what I realized when I went through that journey of restudying everything, how much more I learned after I had this basis, this fundamental, like this foundation of knowledge, clinical knowledge from being in practice from 2008 to 2014, and then going
Yeah.
back and relearning it on top of that foundation. And how much I learned was astronomical. And that's kind of where I started to develop this confidence to teach it. But I'm like, okay, well, what about these people who have now been out of school, have been doing some stuff? What if they relearn it? What is going to happen to their clinical expertise, their clinical skills, their clinical confidence? And I started to develop my little endo residency, I call it. It's called eSchool Everyday Endo Made Easy. And it basically, I take everything that I do in my practice, every template, every trick, every hack, everything that I know that got me to where I am 13 years later, put it in a program. And now I teach it to general dentists so that they can fast track their success. Because
Wow.
the outcome is that patients get to save their tooth. They only have to pay for it one time. They don't have to meet somebody like me to redo it. But there's more successful root canals out there, and there's more teeth saved for the patients.
Oh wow. What a great initiative. And I mean, it's a business born in within a business, but it's an incredible one because it's one that has so much purpose. Not that being a dentist doesn't, but this one is truthfully saving a lot of teeth out there. So what's it like managing a dental office? I know that not everybody, just because you're a great dentist doesn't mean you're a great business owner. So talk to us a little bit about the business owner aspect of managing a dental practice.
That's probably the hardest piece. Managing a team and all the personalities that come with like 15 females in an office is a lot. And that was probably my weakest link, like my weak point when I graduated, because I learned so much clinical stuff, but they don't teach you one thing about business. So I had to learn on the job how to be a manager. I had to learn on the job how to decipher, insurance claims and read an EOB. All that stuff comes on the job because they don't teach 1 minute of it. I mean, I was complaining that they only gave you 2 weeks of endo in dental school. They don't even give you 1 minute of business in dental school. And not even mindset, right? Like all of this is really important. And I think a lot of us graduate thinking, okay, we're running a practice. We don't equate that with it being a business. We don't equate medical care, dental care with a business. I didn't graduate with that mindset. But now that I'm in it, I'm like, okay, no, this is a business and I need to know how to run a business. I need to know how to be a good leader. And that is where I sucked. I was not good at all. So if I could go back and do it all over again, I would read more books. I would listen to more podcasts early on because that's when I started to notice my shift. I had a lot of turnover in my team. And so it was like I was running on this hamster wheel. My practice was growing regardless. I couldn't keep up with the growth, but I also couldn't push the needle forward because I was not a good leader. And once I started working on myself and my leadership skills, I started to maintain a team and grow my team. So it used to just be me and Michelle. we she was my own, like me and her on the leadership team. Now I have Michelle, Mark, Tanya, Krista, Julie, Kendall, Michelle, me. Like it's a big leadership team, but I had to learn how to lead before I could do that.
That's incredible that you mentioned that. Not a lot of people highlight it. And I think the entrepreneurs and the business owners that do show that they're sensitive and they're owning up to, like, look, I may not have been a good leader in the beginning. I was just a good risk taker. I was the innovator, so to say. But, I
Yeah.
figured along the way that, oh no, I'm not a good leader, but I will learn. And it's great that you identified that and then your team continued to grow. That leads me to a question. Any branding advice to a young person that's listening to this and is saying that I want to do exactly what you've done? I want to finish my dental school. I want to maybe become a specialist, start my own practice. Any branding advice as they go along this journey?
I think it's important to really give yourself like unconditional time so that you can dream and so you can figure out what your brand is. So many dentists are like, we're just frantic with our families and running the practice and doing the clinical work. Like, we forget to really think about what our brand is. And anyone can have a brand. Like, you could be an associate working for somebody else and still have a brand within that organization. You don't have to be on your own to have a brand. And I think that's really important. Everyone has something to say and they should share it. And if you just can't be shy, you have to just take a leap of faith and just put your stuff out there and just see what happens.
Would you say there's a specific time frame to gain credibility in dentistry, or is it just organic, and for some it's faster than others depending on the cases that they take on, or the success they have with their clients?
So for me, it took me like a good 10 years to feel like, or maybe just to get through all the imposter syndrome that I didn't even know I was going through. Like, I had no idea that that was a thing. And then I finally felt confident enough to feel like, okay, yeah, I can teach this. I can be the expert. But I think the next generation is just smarter than us back in the day. There's just so many more resources available to them. So I feel like you can fast track it a little bit more than 10 years, but I feel like it takes about 10 years to become an expert. And just to have that confidence that you can carry yourself through the visibility.
Yeah. And my next question was going to be on the prior topic that you touched, was mindset. Speaking about mindset, is there a particular mindset that you stick by each day as you're going through all these, ups and downs and learning curves?
Yeah, I noticed that my energy that I bring into the practice is really important to the way the rest of my team performs on any given day. So if I'm not functioning, my team's not going to function. And I need to make sure that I'm consistent with that. And I'm constantly working on my mindset to make sure it's positive and that I don't get caught up in the negativity.
Yeah. And what's something you do for fun, Sonia? Is there something that you do to get that mindset like recharged?
I mean, I love learning something in the morning. I love sitting in the dark. I have a little meditation corner, and sometimes I'll meditate, sometimes I'll read a book, sometimes I'll listen to a podcast. But I always like to educate myself in the morning, and then on my way to work, I'll probably listen to some music that'll just get me pumped.
I couldn't agree more. There's something about music in the morning.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just sets everything.
Yeah.
Especially when you play it loud.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to the people that meet me at the red light. I should probably lower it. Is there any mistakes? I just bring this question up because I know everybody says, well, was there a mistake that you made that you can warn me of? But I'll ask it, I guess. I say, is there any mistake that you think that you made that you would like to highlight and warn others of?
Yeah, I was a blamer. I blamed everyone but me. And then when I really took a good deep look inside of what the problem was, it was me. And if I didn't fix myself, I couldn't fix anything that was going on around me. And, just really learning how to communicate properly was key. My intentions were great, but only I knew that. I had great intentions, but it never came out right. So once I started really learning how to communicate properly, and making sure the words just came out right, and understanding my boundaries. Because when I'm working on a patient, I'm with that patient. It's hard for me to think about anything else. I want to be so present with that patient because I want that treatment to last forever. And so when I have people like asking me, "Oh, I have an emergency on the phone. Where should I put them in the schedule?" Like I don't have the bandwidth to know where to park that patient on the schedule. And that's okay. And I should be okay with that boundary. Like, hey, don't ask me while I'm with a patient,
Mm.
and then don't come to me if somebody's calling complaining about their bill at that moment when I'm with a patient. And so once I learned to establish those boundaries around myself, like, hey, I'm going to work Monday through Thursday on patients. And on Friday, I will become the manager and I will put out all these fires for you, no problem. Just know when to come to me about what. Like, nobody's going to die because I didn't attend to their bill on Wednesday when I know I can do it on Friday. So just know that, because when you respect that boundary of me and I had that awareness about myself, like I can get snippy if I'm, because I'm stressed out about the procedure. It's not easy.
Of
I don't want
course.
I don't want that stress to be like lashed out at you because you're asking me a question that's not relevant to what I'm doing right now. So I set those boundaries and I was open and transparent and vulnerable with my team and let them know, okay, this is how I am. This is how I want to be. This is how I want to show up for you, but this is what I need from you to make sure that I stay in this way. Also that I can communicate properly and you can take me in the right way. And having that awareness about myself, setting those boundaries, and then just working on those communication skills totally transformed my life. And
Wow.
then allowed me to maintain a team that we love to hang out with each other, even out of work. So that's amazing.
No, that's great that you highlighted that. And again, you're being very raw and just letting people know that, hey, look, like you might think you're perfect, but maybe that's not the way people see you, and that's okay because you can work on that. And that's a really big piece of entrepreneurship and a really big piece of wanting to do your own dental practice is that vulnerability and being authentic and raw with your employees so they respect you and they also respect the limits that you put around yourself. What's your time commitment like? You mentioned that you're Monday through Thursday, you mentioned Friday. I asked this question because a lot of people think that dentists are like these incredible people who make a ton of money, have an incredible life, and it might be true, but there might also be another flip side to it. What's the time commitment like?
So it's changed over the years. So when I first started the practice, I was 5 days a week, always working. I have since added 2 doctors to my practice, and I've also added 3 children to my life. So I have had to be really intentional with my time. And I actually started to design my life. And I'm like, okay, in total control. I can totally do what I want. I can work when I want. And I
Yeah.
can do what I want when I want, right? So every time I added a doctor, I actually dropped a clinical day. And every time I added a kid, I dropped the clinical day. so so now I work 2 days. I have 3 days. So I work Monday, Tuesday. On Mondays, I actually see patients from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. It's a long day. On Tuesdays, I see patients from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. And then I have a team meeting for about an hour and a half. So I'm still there 7 to 7. And then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I work on my online business and being a mom.
Oh, that's great. But
Yeah.
it's still a big commitment of time where, this journey of post medical, post dental school, if you want to own your own practice, it's a lot of work. You're looking
Yeah.
at a lot of hours and a lot of, you said, at one point you had 9 different jobs that you were
Mhm.
crisscrossing back and forth from. So it's not like you might see the glitz and glamour, but that comes at year 13 and you got to be ready for year 1 to 13 to make
Yeah.
it there.
And as a specialist, you may be working 8 to 5 in your practice, but you have to go out and make relationships. So I was always out having dinner or maybe even some lunches with people, but constantly doing that. Now I have like an established network. So luckily those people have turned into friends. So last night I went out with a girlfriend who is a dentist and we work together all the time. And I thought we were going to be out to dinner for like an hour and a half. It turned into 3 hours. So it was, it was fun. But now I get to say that, that part of my life is fun. But doing that in the beginning was a lot of hard work. And I think it's something to consider if you're looking to become a specialist or a referral based business.
Yeah. And I have one final question when it comes to the question aspect of it. What's an entrepreneurial advice that you disagree with, not agree with, but is there something out there that you hear in the web that people are being told that you are like, I don't agree with that statement?
I think it's that, that leaders like kind of eat alone, right? Like I think that it doesn't have to be lonely at the top. I think when you share your vision with your team, with your friends, with your family, there's a lot of people that will support you. And I used to have that feeling that, most entrepreneurs are lonely, but I'm starting to see where connection plays a big role. And it doesn't have to be lonely at the top.
Great one. Oh, I love asking that question too. The first and the last are always my favorite because you never know what people are going to say. And Dr. Sonia Chopra, it's been a pleasure speaking to you and getting to know a little bit more about the world of dentistry and what it takes to really open your own dental practice. But I'll let you close it off, and I'll let you close it off with any final remarks that you have for somebody who is listening to this and is likely starting a journey similar to yours or on a journey similar to yours. What would your message be to them so they hang on there and they keep going?
I think it's really important to be in tune with yourself and to know yourself and to really understand what your personal dreams are and how you want the world to see you. And I think anything is doable. I think anything is possible. I mean, you could have like a midlife crisis just like I did, I feel like, and totally rebrand yourself, repivot your whole career. I think possibilities are endless. It's just you have to be totally aligned with yourself and then keep reminding yourself what your vision is and keep going back to it and let it just lead you down your path.
Oh, that's a great one. Thank you so much. And how can people connect with you? Should they want to join your school
Yeah.
and learn more from you in their own practice?
Well, I have a website called soniachopradds.com. That's Sonia with an I. And you can find me on Instagram at Sonia Chopra DDS and Facebook, Sonia Chopra DDS Endo for All.
All right. Well, there you have it. Thank you. The pleasure is mine. And I hope to all those Rootless listeners listening to this that they take a lot of the incredible advice and information you've given and apply it alongside their Rootless journeys. So thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.